Clinical Trial Diversification Better Practices. My name is Abrams, and we're reviewing Topic 2, Engagement. Health diseases are the difference in health outcomes of demographic subgroups that are closely linked with social, economic, and environmental disadvantages. Biological and social factors contribute to health disparities. The lack of minority populations in clinical trials is not new. It continues to be an issue both for pharma as well as the FDA. About years ago, in 1985, the FDA's Heckler report, host Heckler, stated there was a continuing disparity in the burden of death and illness experienced by Blacks and other minority Americans as compared with our nation's population as a whole. Since we have begun to understand that the patient population in the U.S. is changing, current minority groups will no longer be the minority. The FDA has recently provided guidance that requires that clinical trials include subjects that represent the population, and we must understand how subgroups respond to innovative medicines. Clinical Trial Diversification Initiative recommends that sponsors consider using patient group engagement techniques to begin to understand the concerns of patients and find and share actionable insights. As mentioned earlier, ensuring that clinical populations reflect the disease state is more important than ever. Some of the drivers include regulatory, scientific, commercial, and social responsibility. In the Fidation 07, which was issued in August 2014, ensures the availability of subgroup information and implications by age, race, and sex. In addition, it issues new regulations requiring that new medical products present safety and effectiveness data by sex, age, race, and ethnicity. We need to clear that the lack of inclusion of required demographic subgroup data will result in withholding of product approval until such data is provided. Their files must be representative of the prevalence of the disease in each of the subgroups. Some advantages have yielded a greater complexity of products. Molecular diagnostics and device combinations for targeted therapies and genomics is more common. From a commercial perspective, the population in the U.S. is changing. By 2020, 40% of those under the age of 18 will be non-Caucasians. And last, there's the social responsibility. Clinical inclusion, adequate to characterize safety and efficacy of race and age, at least in the U.S., is important. Companies have identified the importance of including patients, cares, and advocacy groups in the development process. In addition to bringing patient insights into trial planning, it is key to ensure that the study participants are reflective of the real-world patient population. This section will provide an overview of the utilization of patient engagement and focus on diversity to drive recruitment and retention in clinical trials. It is also intended to provide a guide for beginning a conversation among individuals overseeing clinical operations in sponsor companies. This is a slide. However, let me simplify it by stating the current limitations. Unaware of clinical trial research and don't have access to new innovative therapies. These potential patients, as well as MDs in practices, community practices, and even in hospitals. Member companies are designing trials that meet the needs of the companies and not the needs of patients. Caregivers do not provide insights routinely in the trial design and execution of clinical trials. Complex time and event schedules can lead to early discontinuation. with patient groups, patients and caregivers can achieve the following. They can provide insights into challenges and barriers to participating in clinical trials. They can give the journey of the patient so the clinical teams understand the disease. They can help match and navigate potential patients to the trial. And they can identify secondary outcomes that are important to the patient that may differ from the outcomes that are important for the regulators. The partnership between patients, advocacy groups, and member companies are built on trust, open communication, and common goals. Patient advocacy groups have the knowledge, expertise, and real-world experience that sponsor companies need to design and develop patient-centric clinical trials. Sponsors have the ability to listen, ask questions, and refine their clinical trials and to make them less invasive and more patient-friendly. Together, patients and sponsor companies can build understanding of the disease, the asset, and patient population. They can design a clinical trial that has meaningful outcomes to both patients and regulators. This run provides insight into the time points where engagement may impact clinical development teams. The first point, disease prioritization, occurs early in research. Feedback from patients and advocacy groups may be elicited, deciding whether to move ahead in phase 1 testing and whether to bring a new asset into a company. This insight from a patient or caregiver is key, especially when venturing into a new disease area. They help the clinical team understand the daily challenges, the disease progression, of the caregivers, and even experiences from other clinical trials, if any. This is the time to bring advocacy groups to begin to build a relationship. They're instrumental in sharing the disease intelligence, thought leaders, medical need, and what has been successful to date. An integral part of the study design and operationalization. They can barriers to enrollment and potential risks for study discontinuation. More, there are often nuances to protocols that often get amended during the trial. Early identification from patients may decrease the need for amendments later. And is a challenge for most trials. Both patient advocacy groups can be a partner in this endeavor. More patients are talking and taking technology on patient communities and blogs about trial experiences. Additionally, patient advocacy and community groups have numerous patient touch points. Mailings, walks, and webinars. In the trial, it is important to gather feedback from patients, just what is working well and what could work better. Often changes can be made without an amendment, or proposals can be kept for the next protocol study design discussion. Into the patient to relate trial results and provide post-market initiatives or other ways that member companies are looking at engaging the patient. Develop a strategic plan for each therapeutic or program area that includes patient engagement. It is important to define how patient engagement fits to your strategy. Objectives. Is it to motivate patients to your trial? Is it to understand the disease and the journey of the patient? Or to introduce thought leaders in a new therapeutic area for your company? Next, what is the scope? Are you to build a long-term relationship with a patient advocacy group? That is usually the best strategy. It is challenging to build trust if you are in one moment and out the next. Lastly, the patients and investigators live. Epidemiology and analytics data will help you pinpoint where sites should be located. This is a situation that should be vetted with the patient advocacy groups so that you can make appropriate introductions through them. in the area if you have missed any in your own searches. Advocacy organizations focus on different areas such as disease education, research, policy, and clinical trials. It is important to identify where your need is and to choose advocacy groups that share your goals. While it's helpful to know what key activities you will deploy, the advocacy groups often have experience based on the disease, the patient demographics, and working with other sponsor companies. Go open mind and be flexible. Remember, identify metrics that will track your progress. Some may be qualitative, others quantitative. Determine factors or metrics at the beginning of a program is important. Some of these are easier to identify and track, such as tactic-related metrics, typically recruitment-related, such as the number of enrollments coming through a patient portal or number of people identified as coming in from advocacy in the VRS system. They're equally important, such as how many people visited your website's page to learn about the study, or did you increase minority enrollment or identify new minority investigators. At the end of the day, metrics are where you began and where you ended. It is important to get buy-in from management prior to start a study, rather than trying to rationalize what you accomplished at the end. So, strive for a representative population. Aim company-wide goals for trial populations to be representative of the disease. Take an approach. Understand the disease demographics and epidemiology. Patients, investigators, and referrers are, and engage them. Expertise on campaign execution. Engagement during early protocol design in order to maximize the impacts and avoid later reworks. Find the objectives of advocacy diversity strategy. Identify target patient advocacy groups, the tactics, and determine the desired outcomes and metrics. Advocacy groups to do patient inputs early, to best strategies to gain awareness of the studies, and partly in protocol development for trial design and operationalization insight. Help identify, recommend, and engage minority-serving sites. Share results and conclusions with patients. Understand the patient's needs. Understand those factors that are relevant to deciding to participate or not. Because of the language, the cultural, the religious beliefs, understand which images, language, and vernacular resonate with your target population. Be flexible. Be brave. Be open. For information, please Lori Abrams at loriabrams@bms.com. Link to this content. For information on the initiative, the Diversity Initiative, please Accelerate website at www.transceleratebiopharmainc.com. Thank you.